Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for this second video in this series where I talk about money and investing and how it can help you to improve your mental fitness. My name is Christina Liu. For those of you who are new to the channel, I am a mental fitness coach. I help entrepreneurs and professionals to significantly improve their mental fitness so that they can reach their true potential, achieve their highest success, and do it while experiencing sustained happiness. And I use a methodology called positive intelligence to help you to weaken your saboteurs and to strengthen your sage. So if you're interested in these topics, please check out some of my previous videos in the series called Mental Fitness. Now, last week I started talking about the concept of money and investing. And I talked about the first concept that I have learned over the years that I find is really important, which is the 4 types of people. I also share some of the books where I learned my investment philosophy from. And just a quick refresh, the 4 types of people are employee, self-employed, business owner, and investor. And I hope by learning this concept, it has inspired you to also get yourself perhaps in some different categories that you're not in yet. So if you're an employee or a self-employed, then perhaps you can also become an investor. And this week, I want to talk about probably the most important concept that I believe when it comes to investing and managing your money. And this is called the compounding, the power of compounding, or the compound interest. And that's the reason why belonging to this investor category is so important. So right now I'm still talking a lot about concepts, not so much about the practical, how do I invest? How do I manage my money? And maybe I will have some videos in the future to talk about that. But I believe that understanding the foundations, the principles, is so important. It's kind of understanding the why. Simon Sinek said, always start with the why. So here, let's understand why it's important to invest and why this power of compounding is so powerful. And this is the concept that I learned first, when I was probably 22, 23, just graduated with my accounting master's degree and working for one of the big 4 accounting firms in Chicago, downtown Chicago. And one of the evenings after working pretty late, I'm always kind of a bit of a nerd. I love studying. So I went to the bookstore and I thought I'd grab some books. And I just started reading this investment book. And it talked about this concept that I'm going to talk to you today about, which is about compounding. And it just really opened up my mind about, wow, this is pretty powerful stuff that I need to do something about it. And I didn't actually personally experience the compound effect until probably 10, 12, maybe even 15 years after I started investing. So I'm going to show you in some of these graphs why that is the case, but why this concept is so important. And hopefully it will give you some inspiration to start taking some action. All right. So I want to start with a quote about the importance of this compound interest. And hopefully this will catch your attention. And it's from Albert Einstein. He says that compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. So I hope we can all decide that we want to be in the category of those that understands it and earns it rather than those who doesn't understand and pay it, right? So because this is a compound interest, 8th wonder of the world. Okay, so now what is compound interest? And so for those of you who already know what it is, you might think, oh, this is a little bit too rudimentary, and I apologize for that, but I think there are some people, some viewers in the audience that don't really understand this concept yet, so bear with me, all right? So what is compound interest? And again, this is the second concept that I'm talking to you about. The power of compounding is the snowball effect that happens when your earnings generate even more earnings. You receive interest not only on your original investments, but also on any interest, dividends, and capital gains that you accumulate. So your money grows faster and faster as the years roll on. So I know these are just words and maybe it's difficult to comprehend. I think it might be easier to understand through a graph. Now, so what is compound interest? So this blue graph is what happens when you have compound interest, and this orange graph is what happens when you have simple interest. And the numbers here, I'm illustrating an example. Again, just for illustration. If you can't relate to these numbers, don't worry about it. Just look at the example. So here, what I'm saying is, here's someone who is at the age of 22, maybe graduates university, maybe started working, and starts investing a little bit of money. She puts in $1,000 into this investment account that generates 8% of annual investment return. And then she leaves this money in there, this $1,000, doesn't touch it for 45 years. And then at the end of the 45 years, when she's 67, this is usually the age that most Americans retire. If you're living in a different country, it might be slightly different, but gives you an idea, right, of someone who, starts works for about 40, 45 years. She will have $31,920 from this $1,000 that she invested. Again, she doesn't put any additional money in there, but she also doesn't touch it. It's like she invests $1,000, forgets about it, and this investment account generates 8% annual investment return. Whereas this orange graph, why is it kind of more flat like this? Now, this is what's called a simple interest. So in this example, in the orange graph, what happens is she puts in the $1,000 in there. With 8% annual return, it generates an additional $80 at the end of the first year. So what she does is she takes it out of that account and spends it. The next year, the $1,000 generates another $80. She again takes it out, spends it. Next year, same thing. $1,000 generates $80, takes it out, spends it. You see the difference? So in the blue graph, this person invests the $1,000, doesn't ever touch it in 45 years. Whereas the orange graph, every year she takes out the returns or the interest that she earns. And over a 45-year period, what's the difference? $27,000. Well, on $1,000 of investment, right? It's pretty big, right? So you might observe something here in these two graphs. In the beginning, in the first probably 10 years, right? From 22 to 32, do you see these two graphs are pretty much at the same spot? Very similar. There's not a huge difference, right? But however, this blue graph starts going up much faster from about year 10 to 15. And then from that point on, just goes way up. Right? So that's a reason, or the reason, that Warren Buffett, probably the best investor that has ever lived, says that our favorite holding period is forever. Right? Because remember that graph. If this graph keeps going, this is showing 45 years. So let's say it goes up for another 20 years. You see how using this trajectory, just using the 8% annual compound rate, it will grow even faster. That's why Warren Buffett is a long-term investor. He doesn't ever take his investments out unless he doesn't believe in the fundamentals of the company anymore. But he is known for having held investments for 20, 30, 40 years, like you see in this graph. Okay. So now you might ask, all right, because in the previous graph, we're showing an 8% annual investment return. You're like, where can I even get this kind of return, right? If you're putting your money in a savings account or money market, no, you're not getting this kind of investment return. However, if you do put it in the market, you probably can get this kind of return. So here's showing you how the market has been doing over the last 40 years, from 1981 to 2021. And when I say the market, and you may hear other people say the market, and you're like, what is the market? Well, the market is basically all the companies that are in the market. So Apple is part of the market, Google is part of the market, Facebook, all these companies, and you may have heard of, Fortune 100, Fortune 500. These are the market. And there are different indices that will show how the market is doing. So for example, the Dow Industrial Average, that's probably the most followed index. And it's basically 30 of the biggest and the most represented companies in the US that kind of represents how the overall economy or how the overall stock market is doing. So how has the Dow Jones been doing in the last 40 years? It's grown by 3,000%. Now, so that basically is very similar to the graph we were showing. If you invested $1,000 in 1981, didn't touch it in 2021, you would have about 31,000. Yeah? And how does it translate into in terms of annual compounded return rate? So CAGR is another term you might have heard, compound annual growth rate. And this is actually only a CAGR of 9%. Okay, so so if you invested in the Dow Jones index or an index similar to this, you would have gotten 9% return. The NASDAQ, on the other hand, so this is another index. This is a tech index that is a bit more risky. So these companies are a bit faster growth. However, they also have more risk. So the possibility of a downturn is also much greater. So this index has generated over 6,000% return over the 40 years. Now you might see, ooh, that's like double the Dow Jones. So is the CAGR also double? Well, actually, the CAGR is just 2% more. So the compounded annual growth rate is just 2% more than the Dow Jones, but you can see over a 40-year period, it's generated more than double the return. So another thing that you might be picking up, well, this CAGR is really important. And a small change in the CAGR, the compounded annual growth rate, has a huge impact on your overall return over a long period of time. So what is this saying? Well, one thing is that I have read in this book is about how important it is to start investing early. So start investing as soon as you possibly can because of this compound effect, because this slope just gets steeper and steeper as the year goes. So if you started investing when you're 22, which is when a lot of people start working, then you can, in 45 years, get quite a big chunk, even if you just invested $1,000. So here an example of this one friend, let's call her Jennifer. She does this, the blue graph. Now her friend Jane, let's say she didn't realize she needs to invest until the age of 42. And she also starts investing $1,000. And then by the time she retires at the age of 67, she'll have 6,800 rather than the 31,000. And that's a difference of 25,000 just by the difference of investing 20 years later. And we're talking about the same amount of money, $1,000. And this is the kind of difference that you can have. Now, some of you, if you already started investing early, you may be really happy. Yes, I'm doing the right thing. Yes, keep doing it. And then there might be some of you who are in your 30s, 40s, maybe 50s, and you're like panicking, right? You're like, oh my gosh, I didn't start investing when I was younger. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Do I have to work forever? No. Okay. So here's the thing. Don't panic because there is a way to catch up. How do you catch up? Simply by investing more every year. So here, similar example, Jennifer starts investing at the age of 22. Initially, she puts in $3,000, and then every year she puts in $10,000. So this is a little less than $1,000 a month. And by the end of the 45 years, at the time she retires, she'll get close to $4 million. And then her friend Jane, let's say she didn't realize she needs to invest until 20 years later. Well, she can still get very close by the time she retires. What does she have to do? Simply invest more every year. Whereas Jennifer invested $10,000 a year. Well, Jane can invest $50,000 a year. That's a little over $4,000 a month. then she'll be able to catch up to very close to Jennifer's level. Now, I don't want you to get alarmed by these numbers that I'm showing. You may be thinking, if you're in your 40s, how the heck am I going to invest $50,000 a year, like more than like $4,000 a month, right? Maybe that's what's going through your mind, but don't panic. What I'm illustrating here is just an example. And here I'm going up to, close to $4 million. Well, do you really need that much money at the time you retire? And now that's not the point of this particular session or this video, but if you guys are interested in that, we can talk about it. Maybe talk about ways of how you can find the money that you can invest every month, every year, so that you can build up this kind of a retirement for you. What I didn't talk about also is, how do you invest in those indices that I showed, like the NASDAQ or the Dow, to get that kind of compounded annual growth rate, right? So let me come back to you. So what I'm illustrating here in this video is simply the importance of investing early, of starting to invest as soon as you can, and the power of compounding, how the money grows faster and faster as the year goes. And I'm also not here to, give you this panic, oh my gosh, I didn't start investing earlier. And using our concept of saboteur and sage, that's a saboteur thought. So the saboteur wants to tell you what you didn't do right. But as I showed in that graph, you can start at any time. It's never too late. If you're going to keep, dwelling on the fact you didn't start early enough, then you might have missed the boat because all your energy is going there. However, as you say, well, that is what happened, but now that I've learned this concept, I'm going to start investing. Well, that's great because there is a way to catch up. And if we use this law of attraction that we talked about at one point, whatever it is that you want, you have to put yourself in that emotion that you would have if you actually got it. So if you want to have, sufficient amount of money when you retire, then put yourself in that emotion of what it is that you need to experience, you need to feel now, so that you can have that kind of feeling and achieve that goal. And once you put yourself in that kind of emotion, it's much easier to start taking action, which is getting into your sage. Use that activate power to start saying, okay, what is it that I can do? Maybe it's grabbing one of the books that I showed you from last week, and maybe it's continuing to watch this video series so that you can learn more about how you can invest. And so I know this is still quite conceptual, but I promise I will get into more practical details. But I wanted to show you this because this is so important. And this is the first concept that I learned when I started learning about investment. And it just was so eye-opening that made me want to take action. And it's unfortunate we don't teach a lot of this stuff to children because it's actually not rocket science. But, like I said, it's never too late to learn this. So yeah, please, if you have been investing or you know a lot about investment, please give me some comments below, give me some feedback. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comment box, and also subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a video. And also I am now on Clubhouse. So I just joined by the invitation of one of my mastermind friends. And we are going to start a room to continue to talk about the learnings that we've had from Date with Destiny from Tony Robbins. And then in the future, I'll also start some rooms talking about mental fitness and maybe even talking about investment if there are enough people interested. So get on Clubhouse, get someone who is on there to invite you. I know it's still in beta version, but it's a fantastic tool to start talking about concepts and topics, and it's much more interactive. So I would really love to see you there. All right. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And take care, stay safe, and I hope to see you next week. Bye now.